No team in the National Football League has more pressure on them heading into the 2022 season than the Green Bay Packers, and no player has more pressure on his shoulders than Aaron Rodgers.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. You can follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts. Wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers, the number one Packers podcast on the internet, and the show for fans who know what happened. They want to know why and how. Thanks to everyone that makes Locked On Packers their first listen of the day. We hope you like starting your day with us as much as we like starting our day with you. The Green Bay Packers enter into the 2022 season. Aaron Rodgers is coming back. Davante Adams on the tag. We assume that means he will be here and not be tagged and traded. Presumably this will not get so contentious that this relationship has to end. And likewise, presumably Aaron Rodgers being in the mix makes it easier for Davante to want to stay. Even if, and we don't have the contract details yet, but even if this is truly a 4-year deal for the Green Bay Packers and Aaron Rodgers, the pressure to win right now is immense. And no one faces more pressure than Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers. Because last year, they went all in. Financially speaking, they kicked the can down the road to this season to win in 2021. And they had the best team. They got lucky with some fringe roster guys who turned into star players for them. They hit on draft picks. And they made it through injuries to the end of the season when they brought key players back for a playoff game at home as the number one seed, playing a wild card team, a team that had to go on the road to win their first round matchup. And they lost 2 consecutive home playoff losses. Losses in which your best players did not play their best football. 2 losses in which you got beat because some facet of your team, at least for stretches of the game, didn't bother to show up. It is a problem of players not doing enough. It is a problem of coaches not doing enough. And it is a problem of front office, of team building in terms of the shape of this team. And so, if you're going to just run it back, that is a decision that can be made. There's pressure already on the front office this spring to make all of these moves work, to make the money work, and to still find a way to make this team better than it was last year, because last year's team wasn't good enough to get it done. Now, let's not overlearn the lessons, right? This is something we talked about after the 49ers game a couple years ago, the NFC Championship game loss. Don't go into the offseason going, well, everything has to be centered on stopping the run. That's not true. That's not the case. The Packers didn't do that. They did not go whole hog on saying we need to stop the run. And guess what? The next year, they didn't lose because they couldn't stop the run. They lost because they couldn't stop Tom Brady and because they couldn't score enough in the second half, despite 3 interceptions by their defense, to beat the Bucs at home. Everything that they do is aimed at one goal, and that's winning the Super Bowl. And more now than ever, the NFC is theirs to be had. Last year, it was theirs. They were the best team. They were the number 1 seed. And they were the favorites. They were the favorites in the NFC. They were the favorites. They were the betting favorites to win the Super Bowl. They were the best team, and they couldn't get it done. We know, even regardless of what the contract says, Aaron Rodgers does not have very many years left as an elite level player, even if he's going to keep playing. And he has said, I don't want to go out because I can't play anymore. I want to go out when I know that I can still do it at a high level. It's not always the athlete's choice. And guess what? The athletes are always the last to know. Just ask Russell Westbrook. The Packers have to find a way to get this done in what is an NFC now that doesn't have Russell Wilson in it, that doesn't have Tom Brady in it, that has a Super Bowl champion that stands to lose potential key players. Odell Beckham Jr. may not be able to play at all next season. We don't know how healthy Robert Woods is going to be. We don't know if they can bring back Von Miller. We don't know that Matthew Stafford will stay healthy next year. We don't know that Cooper Kupp. There are a lot of questions around that team. And then look around. Who are the other teams? Dallas, no thank you. And then who? I mean, seriously. The Cardinals? Do the Cardinals scare you? No. Seahawks, nice try. Russell Wilson's in the wrong conference. The NFC North is a joke. They've got 2 new coaching staffs there, and I don't think the Bears or the Vikings are going to be particularly good. We know the Lions are the Lions. And so in the NFC South, the Falcons, they're bad. The Panthers are bad. The Bucs, we don't know who the quarterback is going to be, and they could be losing some players as well. The Saints, we don't know who the quarterback is. We don't know that offense can be good without Sean Payton. We don't know that team can be good without Sean Payton. It's the Rams and the Packers, and it's everyone else. And we saw last year the Packers were better than the Rams. The Packers should have won the Super Bowl, and they didn't. And that is why the pressure is what it is. Furthermore, the pressure right now on Aaron Rodgers, until we see those contract numbers, there's pressure on Aaron Rodgers for this contract to not look like it could look like. Not just because he looks like a hypocrite for saying, I didn't want a top of market deal if he takes a top of market deal, and categorically false that I wanted $50 million if he ends up getting $50 million, which right now is what is being reported. And my guess is it's going to shake out pretty close to those numbers. But assuming there's some flexibility in there, right? We are assuming that. But how much? There is pressure on Rodgers to make it work that way, to give them the room to bring back Devondre Campbell, to give Devontae Adams what he's looking for, to maybe re-sign Randall Cobb if that's what Aaron Rodgers wants. There's pressure on Rodgers to prove that this is about him being a team player, not about being paid like the best guy in football, even if he is the best guy in football, the 2-time defending MVP, by the way, which he is, and which he deserves all of it. There is pressure on him after the last 18 months to say, yeah, I'm still this guy. I'm still motivated by winning championships and not pettiness and not perception. I am driven by winning, and I'm going to do everything that I can to win. And I don't come up small in the postseason. You look at the statistics, go look at the numbers. I'm the most productive playoff quarterback in the modern era. That's true. So don't talk about me like that. Well, you got to go prove it. Because I was on this show after the NFC Championship game last year and after the divisional round this year. And especially after the divisional round this year, saying, how do we defend him now? How do those of us who have always defended his playoff record, because he's the most productive and most efficient modern postseason quarterback, how do we continue to defend him if he's going to continually come up short in the postseason. Now, it's not the defense's fault. It's not the defense. It wasn't the defense this year when they had the best team, when they were the favorites. You only get so many chances at this. And the Packers only have so many more runs to go on. So after another offseason of waiting, and after that offseason of waiting that comes after the offseason of upheaval, the summer of honesty, remember? The press conference, the Instagram posts, the Pat McAfee shows, the immunized. After all of that, to come back, which is great. People make it seem like I didn't want Rodgers back. That's nonsense. Rodgers gives this team the best chance to win. After all of that, you have to pay it off. You have to pay it off. It is going to be an even bigger disappointment than it already would have been. If he had retired this year, we would have said the last two seasons were disappointing. It becomes magnified, maybe exponentially, if Rodgers plays 2 more years and they come up short again, because this team has gone all in. They have to do more salary cap gymnastics. They're going to have to do even more salary cap gymnastics once his contract comes in, especially if in 2 or 3 years he's done and they have to eat some monster cap hit, which is pretty likely. There is immense pressure on Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers to get this done now. Other teams face pressure. The Cowboys face pressure, but the expectations have been lowered because they have been doing this for so long. They haven't been really good in 2 decades, longer, almost 3 decades. And so, well, what? Where else is the pressure greater right now? Nowhere. And so this team, it's down to it. It's put up or shut up time for the Packers, for Aaron Rodgers. And we'll see. We'll see. Doesn't mean I'm not optimistic. I certainly am hopeful. And if you're not, I don't know. It's tough to be a fan if you're not. I still think they can do it. I still think they can win it. I still think they're rightfully the favorites in the NFC right now. But we've seen how that movie has gone in the past. All right, we're going to talk about one crucial way Green Bay can get there in 2022, but we're going to do that right after this. It is that time of year again. College basketball tournament season. Finally here. From the latest odds, content, player props, BetOnline is your number one source for all your sports betting news and needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. It's not just basketball. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sports wagering information needs, including live betting and your favorite Las Vegas casino games. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and actions. BetOnline, where the game starts. And thanks for making Locked On Packers your first listen every day. Make sure you're following Locked On NFL. Locked On experts covering the biggest stories around the NFL every Monday through Friday in less than 30 minutes. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. So in order to reach their ultimate goal, which is, of course, winning a championship, the Packers are not going to be able to go out and spend lavishly in free agency to bring in top-tier talent. They are not going to have draft capital and ammunition to go up and get a blue-chip player in this draft. Now, they may fall into one. They seemingly fell into one in Eric Stokes. He fell to the end of the first round. They were able to get him, and he has produced in ways that I did not think he could as a rookie. I thought the ceiling was high. I still think the ceiling is high, but the floor was so much higher than I could have predicted it was. This team needs cheap, young talent. And that's important for 2 reasons. Number one, let's start with cheap. They don't have any money. And so when you don't have any money, you need your draft picks to work out. If you're the Rams and you don't have any draft picks, your trades better work out. It's all about maximizing the resources that you have. With wherever you've allocated your swings, trades, signings, you have to make sure that those things are working. And for the Packers, they are, right? They are. We know that. The free agency signings, Preston Smith, home run. Adrian Amos, home run. Zadarius Smith was a home run. Now it's just a money thing. Rashawn Gary became so good that he's made one of these edge guys expendable. That's a great position to be in. Where did they get Rashawn Gary? The draft. The draft. You were able to get Devondre Campbell because you have not been able to successfully draft a linebacker in 15 years. And so it's a situation where now you have to pay with limited financial resources. Even if they can, they're going to be right up against the cap. Being able to bring anyone else in is a pipe dream. It's a pipe dream. So what you need is to get your draft maximized. You need to find a couple guys in this draft to contribute. You need to find some guys who can contribute on special teams. Essential. Some guys who are just going to come in and no doubt this guy on day one can play in all four phases for you, whether it's a linebacker, whether it's a tight end, a cornerback, a receiver. He can be a punt gunner. He can be a kick coverage guy. He can be a kick returner. Like, you need those kinds of players. You know, linebackers. You think back to those mid-90s teams, Lamont Hollingquest, core special teamer. Those are the kind of guys. And Oren Burks, he was a core special teams player for sure. Some of the issues were on the offensive line. You hope that when you get someone like Rich Bisaccia to come in and that tightens up some of these things. But you need these guys to come in and play special teams. It can't all be the starters. I mean, we've heard Matt LaFleur say he's going to do a study. It turns out there are other teams that play starters more often than Green Bay. I think we're going to see that. But that means you need depth. If you're going to play Allen Lazard, once he gets tendered, and we assume he's going to get tendered, and you're going to play him on special teams, if he gets hurt, you better have someone that can come in and play that role. Someone who can come in and be versatile for you, who can make catches over the middle of the field, who can block a little bit, who has some size and can maybe overpower a receiver or a cornerback. You need the draft to build out your roster because you don't have any other options. Now, this is interestingly different, and I think it's important that we make this distinction. This is different from when Ted Thompson decided the only way he would ever make the team better is through the draft, because they would have cap space and do nothing with it except roll it over to the next year. And they always paid their guys, or almost always paid their guys. They were very good at deciding who was worth paying and who wasn't. Casey Hayward, a miss. Micah Hyde, a miss. I blame Dom Capers for both. This Packers team now, they've spent money. They've spent in free agency, not just on their own players, but they've spent on their own players too. They're going to have the highest paid quarterback in the league, the highest paid receiver in the league, and the highest paid offensive tackle in the league. And maybe before long, the highest paid corner in the league, or something close to it. It's really hard to build a balanced team when you are allocating so many of your resources to those positions. Now, again, the salary cap is fake. And so long as you hit on your draft picks, you can keep pushing the can down the road because you get 4 years, or in the case of first round picks, 5 years of team control at reasonable prices. Now, that fifth year, in the case of first round picks, can get a little high. And they have these new earned incentives for other draft picks where their salaries can go up a little bit if you hit certain statistical thresholds, if you make Pro Bowls, that kind of thing. And that's really good for the players. And I'm really happy that they did that, because someone like Aaron Jones gets screwed because he's a day 3 pick and he's making peanuts to be a really good player, whereas a first or a second round pick is making significantly more to be a worse player. And that has never made sense. If you're more productive, you deserve to get more on these rookie scales. And I'm really, really glad that the NFL did that. I would like to see it maybe even be incentivized more, especially for running backs who are probably only going to get one, maybe two contracts. Maybe two. And usually the second one is a short-term one. The Packers are capped out. So this is, without any hyperbole, the most important draft of the Brian Gutekunst era right now. Because the 2018 season, when they first signed this deal, they had so much more room because they're coming off a Ted Thompson era where they never spent the money. And then they go out in that 2020 offseason, 2019 offseason, excuse me. And I'm always working a year back because anyway. They spend the money. Zadarius Smith, Preston Smith, Adrian Amos, Billy Turner. They had a bunch of cap space to spend, but they're still not dead. They've got some room. You get to the 2021 offseason or the 2020 offseason, and you have to finesse it a little bit. But they were able to add, Christian Kirksey, Rick Wagner. Not a lot of money, but they had some money for the 2020 season. By the end of the 2020 season, now you're really in trouble. Now you're really in trouble because Aaron Rodgers didn't want to restructure his deal, wanted a new deal. And if they could have negotiated that a little bit sooner, maybe they could have made this all make sense a little bit more and they wouldn't have had to do all the other salary cap tricks that they ended up doing. If they could have signed this extension last offseason, this makes a little bit more sense. But now they're tens of millions over the cap and trying to figure out where they go next. Cheap, young. That's the other part. Young. They need guys who in a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, for the next 4 years can get better and produce, because in 4 years, that's when they're going to get paid, and that's when Aaron Rodgers' contract is going to be up. So they need to be cheap and young because they need to be hitting their peak when they're going to get paid when that Rodgers money comes off the books. It's a cycle. That's the beauty of the cycle. Usually your guys don't hit until year 3. At the very least, it's year 2. Usually it's year 3. That's when you get into your prime. Year 4, you get that second contract. The Packers need this cheap talent. And so maybe they decide at 28, they don't like anybody. They trade back. They get picks. They get extra picks so that they can have even more cheap talent. I think that makes a lot of sense. If there are guys that they feel like redundancy in trade, it's why I advocated for, if you can, carry Zadarius Smith until the new league year and trade him. Tagging Devontae Adams makes that difficult. Maybe they can get a deal done, lower that cap hit. The Rodgers cap hit creates space. Maybe you're able to do it and make it all work. I'm skeptical, but it's possible. And that just gives you so much more flexibility to add picks because you need those picks. You desperately need those draft picks this year. And why is this the most consequential draft of the Brian Gutekunst era? Because there is more pressure on the Packers and Aaron Rodgers than any other team and player in football to win now. They have to nail these picks. All right, we are going to get to a conversation that I had with Cody Roark from Locked On Broncos about this Russell Wilson trade on Locked On Today. And I thought that was a good thing to bring in specifically because the Broncos were the other team. They were the mistress in all of this. for Aaron Rodgers, and that didn't end up happening. But so I thought it would be good to get a Broncos side of this. We talk about Aaron Rodgers as well. This was on yesterday's Locked On Today. Would love it if you would go check out Locked On Today. It's all the news that you need to be an informed sports fan in under 20 minutes. So check that out. We're going to get to that in just a second. Thanks for making Locked On Packers your first listen every day. Now go make your second listen Locked On NFL Draft. Ryan Tracy and former NFL cornerback Eric Crocker bring the NFL Draft to life every day with insight and analysis on college football prospects and NFL front offices. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. In an offseason we thought could have tremendous upheaval at the quarterback position, Russell Wilson is the first monster domino to fall in terms of guys who left their team. Aaron Rodgers overshadowed his return to Green Bay with a blockbuster deal. He is going to Denver for Drew Lock, Noah Fant, Shelby Harris, 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, and a 5th-round pick. Denver gets Russell Wilson and a 4th-round pick. Joining me now from Locked On Broncos, Cody Roark. And Cody, this came, I think, as a genuine shock just because of the timing of all of this. What do you think the Broncos are looking at when they're saying, okay, we're going to give up all of these picks and some good young players to get Russell Wilson?
I mean, it was wild. Peter, we were reacting initially this morning, to the Green Bay Packers news, Aaron Rodgers returning. And we're like, okay, well, hey, Rodgers to Denver is no longer a piece because it was reported that it was between Green Bay and Denver for Rodgers. And we're like, okay, hey, now Denver's got to look in free agency. Literally after we're done recording the first podcast, bam, the news drops. I'm like, oh my goodness, this changes everything. After throughout 2 episodes that we recorded, and bam, here we go with the Russell Wilson trade. I mean, for the Broncos, there's some people are saying the Broncos gave up too much, but it's like, what were you expecting at a point? Like, to get a franchise quarterback, something that most teams, like there's various other teams, I can't name the exact number considering how many other quarterbacks, have their franchise guys, but there are so many teams out there that would love to be in the position to be able to trade for a guy like this. And specifically for Russell Wilson, he has a no trade clause, which he waived to come to Denver. Denver's the only destination he wanted to go to. So I think it's very appealing here. I mean, the Broncos right now, they didn't have to give up too much on the offensive side of the ball. You mentioned Noah Fant. That's obviously going to be a question for how they address it this offseason. But Russ changes everything in the AFC. He changes everything in the AFC West in that division. And I think a lot of people are really focusing on what does this mean for the NFL landscape, not to mention with Aaron Rodgers as well in the Green Bay Packers. Now Russell Wilson's out of the NFC. So now it's like we were talking here before we went on air. The NFC is kind of wide open. And for Rodgers to really kind of take hold of that here once again in 2022.
With what they gave up, the first round picks, the second round picks, it is mortgaging the immediate future in terms of your draft capital, but you're gaining this short-term win now mode. Does this roster reflect that sort of mentality, do you think?
I think they do, but also like in terms of draft capital, Peter, they gave up 2 firsts, right? So this year's first rounder, which was the 9th overall pick, next year's whatever that may be, this year's 40th pick, which is in round 2, and next year's second round pick. You mentioned also the 5th rounder. Outside of that, Peter, here is the 2022 NFL draft for the Denver Broncos remaining picks. The Broncos still have 5 picks in the top 115 of this year's draft: 64 from the Rams, 75, 96, 113, and 114. If George Paton wants to, he can use that second round pick plus maybe a third or a couple of third round picks that they have to maybe move up if they really like a guy in the first 2 rounds. Keep an eye on Colorado State tight end Trey McBride. He could be one of those guys Denver looks after, or they could keep these picks right here in the top 115 and continue to build off of a great draft class that George Paton had last year. So while you do give up guys like Shelby Harris, who's a veteran guy on the defensive line, just extended by George Paton last season, I think for him, that's a big blow, but in order to acquire a great player, you have to give up some good players and some good assets to do it. I think Denver's in a good position now with a lot of these guys on rookie contracts, and not to mention now they have a franchise quarterback. I think that they're coming out on the other side of it, relatively well. Plus, Von Miller's rumored to be wanting to return to the Denver Broncos too.
Where do you rank the Broncos now in terms of AFC contenders? We still know Kansas City still going to be really good. Buffalo still going to be really good. Baltimore lurking if they can get healthy. The Chargers have a ton of cap space to work with. So where are the Broncos right now before free agency?
It's really tough to say. I say until somebody knocks Kansas City off the throne inside the AFC West, I think the Chiefs will still be the favorite inside the division. But, a lot of people are having the argument, well, Denver's got the third best quarterback. It doesn't matter. These quarterbacks don't play each other. They play defenses. And when I look at the AFC West, Peter, the Chargers defense was very subpar in terms of the standard that we had initially for them going into last season. The Chiefs defense may lose Tyrann Mathieu, who's arguably the most important part of their defense. And they have a lot of salary cap stuff coming up, especially with the Orlando Brown thing coming up. And then the Raiders, a new regime under Josh McDaniels and a young defense with some playmakers. They have a lot of promise. Russell Wilson gets to go against those defenses. So it's like, hey, you know what? You can't compare the quarterbacks because the quarterbacks each have to go against the defense. And you can make the argument, Denver's got a pretty dang good defense inside the AFC West. They might have the best defense inside the AFC West. So, you talk about the Cincinnatis, the Buffaloes, the Los Angeles Chargers. I mean, it's really hard to say where Denver ranks amongst those guys, but I think it's wide open at this point, at least on paper. We're going to have to see how the regular season gauntlet goes, but I tell you what, the AFC is going to be the wild, wild west, Peter. And so football fans need to buckle up. It's going to be fun.
All right, thanks for sitting through that. I think it's a good show, so I would love for you to check out Locked On Today. We're going to be back here tomorrow with a lot more on everything going on with Green Bay. We're still waiting to see if they can get a deal done with Devondre Campbell, Russell Douglas, exclusive rights free agents, restricted free agents. There's still so much that needs to happen. I wrote about this for The Leap yesterday. So many mysteries that need to be solved. So stay locked, right? Stay with us. A lot more to come. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter at Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts. Wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers. And anytime you want to hit us up on the Locked On Packers fan hotline, you can do that, 920-341-3775 to stay Locked On Packers.